have a special guest today. Is it Dr.? Do I have that correct? Dr. Nathan Jasinski?
Doctor, yes.
That must feel good.
It feels good that I don't have to go back to school anymore.
Well, I think a lot of us out there would love to go back to school right now. But anyhow, we are somewhat related through a couple of means. Well, a lot of you out there know that I used to teach at Rogers High School, and I had Dr. Jasinski's name on a plaque up behind me while I was teaching at Rogers High School. And I'm good friends with his dad, Mark Jasinski, hoping to do a later episode with him on music listening. But we are here today to talk about some cello things and college. So everybody welcome Dr. Jasinski.
Thank you, everybody. Really nice to be here with you. I live right now in Kentucky. I teach at Eastern Kentucky University, which is a four-year university here in Kentucky, also with the grad school. So we do have graduate students here that can get a master's as well. We have a pretty big music department here. We actually have a school of music. It's got about 200 people in the school of music. And I've been here now for 14 years.
I didn't realize it had been that long. Wow, congratulations.
Been that long.
So they got you tenured and everything?
Tenured and everything, yes.
And I've been through Kentucky a couple of times. We were talking earlier that I've spent a good amount of time down in Nashville, and I love driving up through Bowling Green and just how beautiful the scenery is there out in Kentucky. I think we on the West Coast don't really have any concept of what Kentucky looks like in our minds. But for any prospective students out there who want to come and visit you, I think they're going to be really surprised with what things look like.
Yeah, Kentucky is incredibly beautiful. It's very green, a lot of rolling hills and forests, rivers. It's just really pretty. I had never been to Kentucky before I interviewed for my job here, so I didn't expect. But when I got here, I was very pleasantly surprised with how incredibly beautiful the place is. So,
well, college is one of the things we're here to talk about today. If I'm a high school cellist and I'm looking to go to college, maybe not for music, what are some reasons that I should still think about pursuing music when I go to college, even if I'm not a music major?
Well, that's a great question. And in our university, we get that a lot. We get students that have enjoyed playing a string instrument or any instrument for that matter through other high school or middle school years, and they want to keep playing. And there's certainly a place for many people like that at colleges. So at a college the size of ours, we can have people that play instruments that have had a lot of experience. They can play in the orchestra with the music majors. And I know, Mr. Rodall, you probably had that happen at PLU as well.
Oh, yeah.
And not only play, but we actually, at our school, we actually give out scholarships to non-majors. So you can actually get discount from your tuition by participating in the orchestra. So there is room for you. It depends on the school. If you go to a big school that has a conservatory type of environment, you may play like in a second or third orchestra down from the top one. But at most universities, you can play in the major orchestra as a non-major.
Well, and I think a lot of the orchestra conductors out there at the university level are starting to understand that if they want to, get, butts and seats with their orchestras or expand their program, then they need to be accessible to people that maybe don't want a career in music, but are still fine musicians. I mean, think of all the kids that you went to school with that were, solo ensemble placers or maybe were your competition in youth symphony that don't do music anymore as a profession, or maybe music anymore at all, which I think is a terrible mistake to give up music altogether when you're done. People like David Robbie, who is now at the University of Washington, I interviewed a couple episodes ago. He's been doing great work expanding the orchestra program there to include more non-majors. For a long time, sort of in the late 20th century, I don't know if you know the climate up there, but you had to get a scholarship, you had to take lessons and be in the top orchestra. And to be in the top orchestra, you had to be taking lessons with, these people. And And I think that may or may not still be the case to be in that top orchestra, like you're saying, with schools that have a conservatory setting. But now they've got these other orchestras for, somebody who wants to keep doing music, but maybe doesn't quite have the time in their schedule to, practice 2 hours a day and, seriously take music courses.
Yeah.
And if we want to keep people in music throughout their lives, we need to offer them those kinds of opportunities.
I would agree. And I would even go further to say that for people that want to continue to develop their skills in music without being a major or doing it as a career, there is a place for you in the community when you're done with college. Even if your career is something else, there's still a place for you in music. There's plenty of orchestras that are volunteer basis. You can still teach lessons.
Oh, yeah.
If you're well enough. So there's a ton of things you can do. You can play at churches. My experience has been there's always a need in the market for somebody who's highly, well, not even highly, but just trained in playing an instrument. There's always going to be a need for you.
Absolutely. So let's say I'm a junior, a hypothetical. I haven't taken private lessons, but I do okay in class. And after watching this video, I decide I need to get my butt in gear to prepare for some college auditions, because now I'm seeing that maybe music is my vehicle to get the college experience that I want. So where would I even start? What things do I need to be most concerned about first as I go from not having lessons but still, skilled, to being college ready?
That's great. And I've worked with a lot of students like that in my time here in Kentucky. So the first thing I would say is you have to know the college you're going to apply to, or the colleges you're going to apply to, and know what kind of needs or environment they would have for string players.
Mm-hmm.
And they really be excited that you want to audition there.
Mm.
Some may want to say, well, we only really want to focus on the majors, and you have to figure that out. But if there's colleges you're applying to that are really eager to have you join their ensemble,
Mm-hmm.
then that's something you can kind of put in the bank and say, okay, I have a good chance of getting a scholarship there. You also want to ask the schools that you're interested in if they accept non-majors in their orchestras and if they give scholarships to non-majors. So some of them do, some of them don't.
Yeah.
So that's one.
In my experience, having recently exited academia and keeping my tabs on the pulse, it seems like more and more schools are going towards that model of music scholarships for non-majors, because we just can't have the ensembles we want without the biology major who happens to be the best violinist from their town. There are lots of people like that, and it's I don't think it's an insult to music that person wants to be a doctor. I think that's actually it's a fantastic compliment to their music education.
Yeah, and we've all known people that are incredibly talented at music that don't choose it as a career, and that's absolutely fine. They can still enjoy it their whole life, like we said. So let's say again, back to that, if you are wanting to audition for a school, you want to prep for that, you got like a year to prep for it. The thing I would do first is find out what the audition requirements are.
Mm-hmm.
And so they probably have those posted on their music websites, or you can easily make a phone call or an email to the music office and get the audition requirements. And then once you have the requirements, usually the requirements are around something like this. They want 2 contrasting pieces. It doesn't really matter. It's not really prescribed. They don't have a list. They say, just give us 2 contrasting pieces that show us your best skill level. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they'll ask for scales or an etude, but usually the 2 contrasting pieces are things you can pretty much bank on. And the contrasting pieces, they usually mean like a fast piece and a slow piece, or 2 contrasting styles. Like you want to play something from Bach and maybe something from a little bit later, like the Romantic era. So you just want to have 2 pieces that show your best skill level. Now I would encourage you to not try to pick something that's too hard. I would personally say pick something that you can master or play really, really well,
Hmm.
rather than something that you're going to make you nervous and you can't really quite get the technique for. Play something that shows that your best skill level, but that's something that you feel comfortable playing. So
I'm a big devotee of Burton Kaplan, if you know who he is. He wrote a
yes,
book called Practicing for Artistic Success. And one of his tenets is the technique of success at any cost. So if you can't play the Fauré elegy, maybe scale it back to um, oh god, well I don't know cello repertoire, but something a little bit easier. If you can't do that, maybe something less. And then once you've decided on your piece, well, probably you're not going to be able to sit down and play the whole thing perfectly. Can I play from letter A to letter B? Can I just play the first measure at letter A? So that every time you leave the practice room, you know that you got better. So
that is,
how can we technique of success at any cost? We use that technique to maybe go from your average high school cellist to somebody who is really ready to maybe the prelude from the third Bach cello suite, and what's something maybe slower, more romantic that's achievable.
yeah. So the prelude to the first Bach suite would be a great thing to play for an audition that shows you can play fast and busy with your left hand and your right hand.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's a few pieces that I would suggest you can look at for the contrasting piece to that. Just say the
Hmm.
slower piece. All right, elegy is a good one, but it does have some really advanced stuff in there that can be really hard to master. So there's a few pieces that I would say. First of all, I've had a lot of cellists audition on the Swan.
Really?
I have. I've had a lot of them bring the Swan in as their slow piece.
If
And
you can do it well, that's beautiful.
yeah, and the thing about the Swan, yeah, maybe it's not the hardest piece, but we're going to be focusing on as your teachers that are watching you. Can you play with a good tone? Is your vibrato good? And
Mhm.
do you have both play slow? You know,
And well,
so
with all the shifting, that's a great indicator of what kind of ear you got as well.
absolutely, there's some really awkward shifts in there that go high and they cover the range of the cello. So the Swan would not be bad if you can play it to the point where you're really happy with your sound.
And
So
that sounds like a really achievable goal for any student out there who maybe has never had private lessons before and might continue to work on pretty much on their own. I think that's a great piece for them to be able to achieve exactly what we've set out for them to do.
yeah, I definitely agree. The cool thing is with you with the way things are right now is if you don't have access to a private teacher, and you want to make this jump to kind of get your skills up there, there are tons of YouTube tutorials that I find myself to be excellent.
Yeah.
Um, some of the best players in the world are making free content on YouTube that teach you how to shift or teach you how to vibrato or teach you. I mean, it's just really good teaching, and anyone has access to it.
Yep.
So yeah, I always direct a lot of my students to those
Mhm.
supplemental websites or the videos to watch because sometimes those guys can explain things incredibly well. And
Mm.
anyone,
Well, that was something I was talking about with my violin teacher Sven Ronning. Was there are expert musicians and expert teachers, and those aren't, they're kind of mutually exclusive, or they don't have to be anyway. That there are some teachers out there who are such naturally good players, they don't really know how to explain it to you, that what is going on here that isn't helping your shifting. But with the great resource that YouTube is, you can find that person who is expert musician and expert teacher who just says it in that the one way that you need to hear it. And maybe that means you search up Suzuki lessons on the Swan, and you watch 20 of them, and only one of them really spoke to you. But that's the beauty of having access to so much content, is rather than what you and I had to do when we were kids and shop around for different teachers and uh, you know play our scale for the eighth time that week for a new person. uh, Kids can just go on YouTube and find the style that works for them.
It's a great resource, and it's one that I take advantage of myself.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm playing a piece and I can find a tutorial that really is really great, I think it's fantastic to watch. So you guys, yeah, you will have access to so much knowledge, and some of these people are incredibly generous. I mean, they've devoted. I mean, here's great soloists or players that have a career and they're still making this free content for everybody. It's just a wonderful community out there. So I would say you can take advantage of that,
Mm-hmm.
but there's nothing that will take the place of live feedback from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go on YouTube and get all that information, but I would encourage you that once you've taken it to your workshop and start working on it, that you go to your teacher. Mr. Rodall would be a great example. Take it to him. He has a great ear. He's been trained, and say, can I play this for you? And can you give me some feedback on what I'm doing? What's working? What do you think isn't working? You have to have that live feedback, or else you don't really know if what's coming out of your cello or violin is what you want, or maybe that's not what you want.
Yeah.
Find somebody with a developed ear with a lot of training that can give you some honest feedback.
Well, and something that I've seen you doing on social media and that I've been doing with myself is recording myself playing, which can be really difficult to do. I'm sure when we see you playing one of the Popper etudes, that wasn't the first take, I bet. They're really hard to do, and it's kind of a really ego struggle to record yourself and be comfortable with that. But you can be your own teacher, because when it doesn't sound best. Maybe you don't know how to make it better yet, but even any of my students could listen to a recording of themselves and compare better and less better.
That is a great point. We all carry around these incredible teachers. You record yourself, and you can learn so much about. I remember when I was in college, in order to record myself, I had to do it through what was it? It was one of those tape. It was
like a
tape
Betamax.
It was a stone scroll,
Yeah.
Well, but it was like one of those tape things, and the sound was okay, but it was this whole process trying to get the tape wound.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm saying? But now you've got these videos you can just, and it's an incredible thing. So yeah, record yourself. However, I've had my students record myself, and they bring it back. I mean, record themselves, and they bring it back to me, and I say, "So what did you think?" And they said, "Oh, I think it was great." Mm-hmm. And then I listen.
Did you listen to
it? I say, "Well, what about this here?" They're like, "Oh, well, yeah, that was a little out of tune." And then I say, "Well, what about this phrasing here?" "Well, maybe I kind of ripped off the ending of that one." So it is still important, even though you can have these ears, play your ears enhanced by playing back for you. You'll take it to someone who's whose ears have been a little more experienced than yours, so they can give you that feedback that may help your ears get better as well. So it's important to have that person-to-person feedback when you're preparing. And then the other thing is, let's say there's a technique you feel like the piece requires of you, but you just can't seem to get. You just practice over and over, and it feels like you're hitting that wall, and you're just like, man, I just can't get my vibrato to sound like the guy in the video.
Yeah.
The question is, what are you supposed to do then? Do you say, well, I can't audition for the college because my vibrato's not great, or my shifting doesn't sound smooth, so I shouldn't audition, I'm just not going to do it? If you make it all the way to that moment where you have to audition and you still don't feel like your technique is perfect, just know that you're at the beginning of your college career.
Well, and I would venture a guess, and I hope you'll back me up on this, that when committees are listening to these recordings, or these auditions, or recordings as it might be during these times, you are not listening for perfection necessarily, or who is the absolute best cellist. You're also, at least some percentage, listening to what potential exists there.
That is such a great point. I have sat through now 14 years of auditions for college, and I've never heard any student play a perfect audition yet. And majors and I've had great cellists come in, and some of them beat themselves up and say, "I'm sorry, I just didn't feel like it." And I tell them all, I say, "Look, we can see what's there. I know you were nervous. I know you missed that thing, but we can see the kind of skill or the kind of potential that you've got, and we know you're coming into college. You're entering. You're not exiting,
Hmm.
and we know what we can work with in there, and we can see what you can do. So don't feel the pressure
Hmm.
that it's got absolutely perfect to get a scholarship or to get into the school or whatever. The professors are looking for certain things, and they've seen students over the years. They know what to look for.
Well, and
So
this is a conversation I've had a million times with my mentor Sven Ronning. Uh, that the people who can get the full ride to Juilliard, they don't need Juilliard. They're already there. If they can win that kind of award, they don't. Somebody who can play a perfect audition doesn't necessarily need that scholarship. I mean, they absolutely deserve it if they can play like that. But clearly, they've had some amount of training that has already prepared them to the degree that you hope to prepare the majority of the students that you already have.
and that's a great point. Those people that, yeah, and then the problem with social media and YouTube is you're comparing yourself against what are some of the best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so much out there that these incredible players put on there. So you look at that, you think, well, I don't sound like that.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, those people aren't going to be competing with you for your spot.
Well, and even uh, some of the YouTube personalities out there, or like just you and me when we post a video on Facebook. One of my close friends, Grace Yoon, she's from Tacoma, but now she mostly does like covers on YouTube, or at least that's how she's most well known. And I had students give me some feedback after watching that video, and they were shocked to find out that it takes multiple takes and it's hours of editing. It's not just like even somebody who is as talented and as practiced as you can't just pull out the Elgar and play it top to bottom. You'd have to take a couple of weeks to get it back into shape.
Yeah, and the thing that you don't see, that's the thing. The problem with YouTube or social media is you kind of see that tip of that iceberg, and so, and again,
Yes.
you're comparing your best with your worst with their best, and so be careful that you don't get into that comparison mode and get discouraged.
Hmm.
Um, so use that as a tutorial, use it for inspiration, and use it as a goal. But remember, you're working on yourself at your own pace, and especially if you're not going to be a music major in a career,
Hmm.
um, know that your job in the college is just to sit there in the orchestra and contribute to the orchestra, to play the notes with a good tone and to play in tempo and to play in tune. And so if you can do those things, then you're going to be a valuable asset to the school, and they're going to want you there.
Well, and it certainly sets you apart from the valedictorian who's got straight A's, who has great SAT scores, but really didn't do any extracurriculars outside of not that this is something you don't want to pursue, but only doing debate team. It was the one extracurricular. These even smaller schools like PLU where I went, they want to see a diverse resume when you're applying to the school, and music is, I would assume, uh, one of the more highly valued extracurriculars that people are looking at with these applications.
I would say so. Yeah, there's so much positives that come out of music. I remember I was in the Tacoma Youth Symphony when I was in high school, and I remember when I graduated, they had some stats for the graduating class. No, the whole youth symphony. I think the
Yeah,
average,
they still did this when I graduated.
yeah, the average GPA was like a 3.8 of the
Yep.
whole youth symphony.
Uh-huh.
That's just, oh my gosh, I don't know if you could get that many high schoolers in one room, and have that kind of academic record. So it's really incredible that there is a correlation, I believe, between playing a string instrument in particular and academic performance and the exercise of your mind. So I think a lot of educators understand that.
Yeah.
And
Well, I like to think that what I teach in orchestra isn't, how to put the bow on the string and play the notes. It's dedication, and responsibility. That, when I tell you to, show up at 7 a.m. for our contest, that you show up on time, you have all of your materials, and you've practiced, and that throughout your, orchestra career, you've learned that putting in small increments of practice consistently is better than, big random bursts here and there, which is the same with any job you're going to do. Is you want to have consistent, dedicated work, and that's 90% of what we do in music. Manipulating the instrument is just something we have to get out of the way before we can start really, making music.
Well, that's true. And the other thing is, being a musician, it's just really you against yourself, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard thing to sit there and face your own imperfections every time you pick up your instrument and try to get better at it. Not something a lot of people really instinctively like to do, is to be reminded how much they're not good at something when they play. And every time I pick up my cello, I'm reminded about one thing that I wish I could be better at.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also an opportunity for me to sit down and work at that and to see the improvement over years. And so I think these are skills that translate very well to other careers. To be able to look at something for years that's not always immediately easy to do, but you can see over time you're going to get better and better. That's something that's transferable and desirable in any field you go in.
Well, and the dependability of a musician. I'm sure when you were in Tacoma Youth Symphony, they were still saying that early is on time is late, late is unacceptable. I mean, that is the TYSA mantra. That translates to the rest of your life. I mean, that's not music specific at all. And I'll never forget, and if I'm not, I was in on this meeting, the both of us were about 5 minutes early. Even though that, we had our start time, but we were both in here early because who knows what happens, maybe you need to get set up and prepare. God forbid you're a percussionist and you have to roll everything out of the cage. But that applies to life very much so. If just working at Taco Bell, you got to get everything set up for your shift so that you got what you need to keep going. You have to make sure that everybody else has what they need coming up, that things are being prepared, that it translates to everything. Yeah. So if we get changing tack here, returning to the hypothetical student, have you got a cello there with you?
I do. I have my cello right here, so it's right there.
And maybe this is a silly question, but my students always want to know, does your cello have a name?
This cello does not have a name. I got this cello when I was starting my doctorate degree, and I think I was so stressed out for 3 years that I just never bothered to name it.
I imagine you were a little busy.
Thinking about that, I was but it's an English cello. It was made in 1901 by a guy named Richmond Henry Bird, and it's made in Liverpool. So it's where the Beatles are from. So at some point I'm going to put that together and make a name for it. But yeah.
Well, and totally unrelated for the kids, but for the teachers out there, some of those English instruments are actually pretty good because of Hill and Sons. The way that they evaluated a lot of the fine Italian and German instruments, a lot of that really high quality wood was coming through Britain throughout the 19th, late 18th, 19th, early 20th centuries. It's from that one mountain range in like Bosnia that really expensive wood comes from. And some of these English guys were getting it and were doing pretty marvelous things with it. And they don't always cost as much as some of those Italian or French instruments in my small amount of experience with luthier work.
People really like English cellos in the last 20, 30 years have become really appreciated for their quality. And so that there was a really strong presence of making cellos in England in the 1800s and early 1900s. And so they've become actually really nice cellos. But anyway, I really like this cello. It's a nice sound. it's been friendly. I have another cello that's being fixed right now that's French, but I usually play that one for solo concerts. I just got that more recently, but this one, I've had this one for a long time now, and it's really friendly to me.
Well, it's always interesting to return back to, the instrument you played in high school, or the one you grew up with, as compared to whatever new toy you're messing around with now. I actually have one of your dad's violins right now. I'm doing some adjustments on it for him.
Oh,
Yeah, his Van Zant. I put a compensated tailpiece on, made a new sound post and moved that around, and it's really making some good sounds now. But there's something about playing on a really good instrument that makes you love practicing even more. And if a student is in a position to get that next step up, I mean, nobody's talking about buying a Strad for a high school student, but just something that makes you feel good about playing and loves your sound. I forget which one of my guests was talking about it, but the number one reason that kids quit, band or orchestra or choir, is that they hate their sound. And so
well,
it's really important that you're on an instrument that makes you feel like you can make good sounds.
yeah, I've actually gone cello shopping with a number of my students, and the change that comes over them when they find an instrument that they pick, that they go to the shop and they pick out it doesn't have to be exceptionally expensive.
No.
Just one that they've tried out a bunch and they found the voice that they like. It motivates them to practice so much more. It's just
Absolutely.
an incredible, yeah, it's a wonderful thing. So, and people always ask me, well, how much should I spend on an instrument? And I think the answer is, well, spend about what you can afford.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be extravagant. Don't feel like you have to reach a certain dollar amount to get a nice. There are nice instruments being made now for all price ranges.
Yeah.
I've heard some incredible sounding cellos you can get for $3,000. I just had a student buy one for $3,000. This thing sounds amazing. The huge sound, beautiful sound, and I just think, my gosh. I mean, when I was in high school, it was hard to find something like that. But there's so many instruments being made now, so yeah, I wouldn't put a dollar amount on it, but just go search, and when you find one, you'll be.
And they have not paid me to advertise, but Hammond Ashley, which is in Issaquah, my wife used to be the upper string specialist there. I mean, they specialize in that like 800 to 2,000 range in all the instruments, and they're like one of the only places that you can get a decent bass for a student. And I think we're in agreement here. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to be something that makes you feel good about playing and practicing. So that was a totally unexpected tangent, but I think one that was worthwhile. So what are some things that we could, little technical things that we could do to improve our sound on the cello as we're looking forward to this hypothetical audition?
Sure. So I'm going to give you, I've got like 3 things I want to share with you to take away. These are things that anyone can do. I'm gearing it mostly to cello, but I think for violins and violas and basses, it also applies. So don't think if you're not cello, it doesn't apply to you.
Yes.
But I find with cello, I'm going to start with the first one that I noticed with young cellists that are developing their technique. The very first thing that I noticed, since cello is the size of the cello, is we have to shift all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the things that I see in my students when they come to me, and cellists who just start, maybe they've never had a teacher, is they think that the shifts have to go way faster than they need to.
Yeah.
And so the problem is then if you shift really fast, really what I find is you're tensing your muscles, and then you make this kind of this motion that goes fast.
And a lot of times you miss the shift in that scenario.
Exactly, you miss because when you're tense, you don't have a lot of accuracy. So I want to show you the speed of a shift, and I'm gonna play. Well, I could play the Swan. I could play the opening of the Swan.
That'd be great.
Yeah, because it's got a lot of shifts just in the first few bars. So if you're playing the Swan, and obviously this is a slow piece. If you haven't heard the Swan, it's a very slow piece. But if you have this. If I shift fast, then I kind of get this little jolt, this little bump, and I feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to shift this far, and I have to do it really fast because I have to get there to there in one beat. But think about how slow the swan is, and it's right. So
If you have a quarter note to shift, you use a full quarter note to shift, more or less.
and it actually enhances the feel of the piece. If you shift in the tempo of the piece, then the audience visually gets to see that happen and they hear the slowness of the shift. And I don't think anyone minds if you hear a little slide in the swan. In
No.
fact, it's actually really nice to hear that little, if you have like, you want to hear that nice little slide. And especially if you have, right, you want that slide. You want it. So if you feel like you have to go, I missed the shift because I got tight before and I went really fast and I couldn't hear it. So I want you to think about every shift. It doesn't matter if it's from first position to fourth position. It doesn't matter if it's a big octave shift. It doesn't matter if it's going from first position to second position. You're going to have. But I would love it if when cello shifted, I could see there was some thoughtful preparation and slow moving because you'll be more accurate.
Especially as you're thinking about getting your arm around the cello for those deeper shifts.
Yeah, like let's say you have a deeper shift, an octave shift. Let's say you have one. You have a C of. I'm going to start preparing my arm here.
And you haven't even started moving yet. Yeah.
My arm is still stuck on this C, but I'm already going the direction. I'm kind of. And then I can travel very lightly and slowly. And I'll arrive nicely on this E. So it's actually, we can shift way slower than we think as cellists. Basses, I know it's the same for you. On the violin,
absolutely. No, I tell all of my private students that they should use all of the available time to complete a shift that they have. And we'll worry about hiding the shift later. Because that's actually something that's fairly easy to do, hiding a shift when you need to. You just make a little bubble, it's not a big deal. But that slow shift, even when it's fast, I wonder if you might help us understand, how do you make a slow shift when it's fast?
Yeah, so that's a great point, because you say, okay, Dr. Jasinski, fine, when it's the swan, I can do that, but what if I'm playing something, so here's the thing I would practice, and you can just pick an interval. Pick whatever, you can start with a small interval, like you can do 1 to 1. The thing I would always want to say to you, if you want to go fast, is the fast should be light. So if you can think light and fast, if you think light and heavy, light and tight, or fast and tight, no way. You have to think. So I'm actually shifting still kind of slow. I'm actually going. So if you can, it's probably easier to see.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we could see your thumb.
Well, it might be easier to look from the side, because you're going to see that my arm is shifting like this and not like this. Because cellists love to shift with their wrist only.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So cellists, be careful that when you shift that you're not going like this way, but you're going like this way. And you see what happens to my thumb. My thumb just stays still. I'm not trying to move my thumb around when I shift. Everything stays in this shape, and you're just moving it around the cello like this. So that your hand is always in a playing position no matter where you are. If you land here, you just go like that. So if I go. So
and
I'm
maintaining that good hand position no matter what placement you're in.
Yeah, far too often I see cellists shift like this.
And it sounds like that too.
Yeah, so even I can sound really bad if I shift wrong.
Yep.
So that's the first thing, cellists. Anytime you have a shift in a piece, make sure that you're not shifting too fast. You have to consciously work on it, because if you just shift by instinct, you may shift really too fast and too tight. But I want you to really think that that can just stay in the same shape and you're just moving around the cello.
Absolutely.
So that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, cello players. I'm going to move this down a little bit.
Yep.
I don't know if you hear cello players more bow, more bow. I don't know if cello players hear that, but I find that with cello, we don't often need more bow. The instrument is bigger, the strings vibrate slower, so more bow oftentimes will get us less sound.
Yes.
So cellos, if you are playing and you don't feel like you really like your tone, and you're bowing like this, your bow kind of skips on the surface of the string. It doesn't really dig in. So for cellos, and even more so for bass, I want to see if we can get a slower. Once you can get a slower bow that's down by the bridge a little more, and then you get a much louder, much more full sound, and you won't have to work as hard. You won't have to move so much to get this sound. You really just play. You get a nice, beautiful sound, but you have to learn how to play with that weight down here. So cellists, one of the biggest things, you practice in front of a mirror, in front of a video camera, and watch your right shoulder. If that shoulder comes up,
gotta be down.
You're totally keeping all that power, all the weight, all the tone right here, and you gotta drop that down. Or I can go. I take all my power out. So cellos, it's important that the thing is, you practice. You can practice this with scales in particular. Maybe just use half of your bow and get the best sound you can from half of your bow. Make a basic quarter note stroke. So I'm thinking maybe if you have like Brandenburg 3, if you've played Brandenburg 3, right? Instead of, so you really want to just use the minimal amount of bow that you can use, but you have to get used to playing down by the bridge a little bit with a good heavy weight in your fingers. Feel that you got that weight.
One of my good friends we were having a discussion about bowing lanes, and nobody can agree on which one is lane 1 and which one's lane 5, or do you have 5 or 3, and they suggested instead that next to the bridge is the slow lane and next to the fingerboard is the fast lane, because you can move really slow and get a lot of sound next to the bridge, as you're saying. And maybe if you're up next to the fingerboard, if you want to get lots of sound, you do need to move a little bit quicker. But for the majority of situations, especially in rehearsal, in an orchestra setting, not necessarily a solo setting, and at least at Port Angeles with the symphonic orchestra, I've got like 40 or 60 cellos, depending. So we don't need more sound. We've got plenty of sound. But more quality sound, I would take.
So what's the issue of quality that you hear mostly?
I think it's when you're doing that light and airy thing. It's just a lack of contact with the string. Something we practice in class, and I hope a lot of you out there are already doing. I call them wiggle bows, where you grab the string with enough pressure that you can't, it won't make any noise, and you can wiggle the string, so that students can experience what it feels like to actually have contact with the string. So you wiggle and then pull, and do the same thing at the tip, because it's 3 times as hard.
And it's a very different feeling at the tip.
Absolutely.
Cellists, maybe violinists, this works, but I find a lot of cellists experience a large amount of tension right with this muscle right here.
Oh yeah, sure.
And they're grabbing, and this actually kills your sound, because you're actually you're actually freezing all your arm weight right here. You're grabbing, and so you're not letting everything just relax into your fingers. You're squeezing this thumb. So I found a really cool thing that I like to have my students do, where it's called vibrato on your bow. Okay, if you can actually hold your bow like this with 2 fingers here and your thumb here, and if you can have the feeling of vibrato, the same way you would feel it in your left hand here, but if you can feel that same,
Oh, I understand.
actually really good because it teaches you can still
You want to
hold
be
the bow.
upside down?
Yeah, you can hold the bow firm, but you don't have to squeeze this muscle like a fist. You can have the flexibility in your thumb in particular. And you establish the relationship between your fingers and the thumb that they can be loose but firm. And then you put that on the string and you get this sort of a feeling. It totally helps the cellist conceptualize a very difficult thing to think about is how do I play and not grab like a fist?
Mm-hmm.
For bass, that would be also a problem, even more so because it's so much weight you need. But for cellists, I find cellists struggle with this. We struggle with, because our bow doesn't rest on the string. We can't just,
Yeah.
our bow will fall off if we don't hold it. So I find that if I have my students do this every lesson, we start it off, we say, okay, we're gonna hold this and you're just gonna do that vibrato here. And we can go fast, we can go slow, and then we're gonna put it on the string and we're gonna feel. It also helps that sautiller stroke too, that fast.
Yeah.
That fast.
As I was attempting that exercise myself I have a little cut off bow here. It reminded me of like what I would refer to as like a Beethoven scrub. You know, when he gives you like a dotted half note with 16th hashes. That's exactly how my hand feels, is what that exercise is.
Yeah. It's very good. It's very good, but it's so hard to conceptualize this. I find to teach, say, well, don't squeeze. And then they say, well, how do I not squeeze? Because you're holding this bow. So anyway, that's something I've found that works very well when you want to actually have a tangible. Mm-hmm. So that's the second thing, was to really bow with cellos with less bow. Find out how little bow you can use to get the sound. And try to relax this thumb so you can maximize the weight of your arm going in the string. Get that nice sound. All right, and
there's a little bit of debate. I mean, most people agree about, pinky placement for cello bow hold, but I've seen a couple people who kind of float around up here, not like full violin bow, but like kind of just floating up here. And I think the missed connection is that it's really about this, about thumb and the middle fingers. And if my answer to when a cello player asks me, well, my teacher asked me to put my pinky on top of the stick, my answer is always, well, you should do what your private teacher says. But what we're ignoring is the importance of these fingers with the pinky.
Yeah, really with cello, because you're holding it square and not at that angle.
Yeah.
Right? Really, you get a lot of that balance in your hand from these fingers. I've even seen some great cellists play with that pinky off.
Yep, absolutely.
After playing like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I only find the pinkies helpful with cello is if you're at the very frog. Like at the very frog, the pinky provides a balance kind of weight there. Yep. But out here, the pinky does very little. I mean, it does very little out here. In fact, it doesn't even really touch. You're kind of out here. So yeah, I mean, that's funny that there's a cello debate out there. If cellists debate about anything, it's probably that. But and then the very last thing I wanted to talk about is something that I've been really recently discovering is so important, and that is for cello players, all string players, but for cellists who experience tension in the left hand. I know a lot of cellists experience tension here, trying to push the strings down and all that.
Mm-hmm.
The main problem I've seen, and I've done it in myself, is that we just don't release the fingers that aren't being used. And so cellists, a lot of times we keep our weight on our first finger and try to play these other fingers without letting the weight go from our first finger. And so what happens is this finger gets all the weight, and then these little weak fingers by themselves have to try to push the strings down and function by themselves without any help.
Mm-hmm.
And our hand is really tight, awkward, and we can't coordinate, and we get stuck and we get tired. So one of the things I want you to try, you can do this at home, you can do this with scales, you can just do this with 3, 4 fingers, is you can play like here, you're gonna feel here, you wanna put the weight, get the weight. So you wanna put the weight on the finger, even the pinky, put the weight, the arm weight on that pinky. Don't let the weight stay back on your first finger and then try to do the pinky. Because then the pinky feels very weak and it gets clicky and it starts to stick and it's just, everything gets tight. So if you want to do an exercise just like that, it's very helpful to try to feel that. I mean, think like you're playing the piano. You don't hold a finger down on the piano. You let them go.
Mm-hmm.
And pianists can play super fast because they're letting their fingers go all the time. Sometimes I think string players, we feel like we have to hold our fingers down in position. And that kills our agility and it kills our vibrato.
Well, you probably don't want to be, lifting up your fingers too far, like like a toddler who's just touched maple syrup or something.
You don't want
Yeah, you want to keep it pretty digital.
Yeah, but it's just getting the weight off. It's just, I mean, you can probably see it better from this side.
Yeah.
Some of it there. So I just take the weight off. And then I can keep the vibrato.
Uh-huh. Could you maybe hear the difference between vibrato with third finger with the 2 extra fingers and then without?
Yeah, I'll show you. If I try to keep my finger, if I go, the 4th finger is almost impossible. That's as good as I can get. But if I take them off,
huge difference.
It's really going to help your vibrato if you can let go of the fingers that aren't being used, and that'll free up the left hand. You'll not get fatigued at all, because you're always building relaxing into your playing, and it's so helpful. So cellists, you have the problem with tension in your left hand. You feel like you get tired. You play a long piece. You have to practice getting heavy weight into your fingers, but then releasing the ones that aren't done. It's so helpful. It's so important. Your vibrato will get better and your agility will get better.
That's great. Well, I have one more question before we wrap this up for you. And I ask this of all my guests. And it's, if you can think back to a time in your musical career where you were really struggling, if you could go back in time and tell yourself something that would help you survive or maybe help you make a different choice altogether, what might that bit of advice be to your former self?
That is an awesome question. I think it would depend on the individual, but for me, I would always beat myself up if a performance didn't go well. I would always just say, this mental talk of, oh, it's terrible, you've wasted all your practice. It's just because if I had a performance where I got nervous or things didn't go like I thought, I would just totally get in my headspace and think, that was terrible, and just kind of beat myself up. It happens to a lot of musicians.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I would tell myself is there'll be another concert. And I think when I was younger and didn't have so much, I thought every concert was it. Like if I didn't play it perfectly here, then everything I've done before or after is going to be useless. And I would put this artificial pressure on myself, feeling like if it didn't happen perfectly now, then everything was wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned to be way more generous with myself and say, this whole thing is a process, but I don't know if I'll ever be done with.
Well, and as professionals now, and not just in music, but just professionals in, in adult life, if you see every audition or every interview as the interview or the audition to the rest of your life, you're going to be pretty disappointed if it doesn't pan out. But if, as you suggest, if we take the perspective that there will be another audition, another performance, another interview. We can stay on that growth mindset.
That's an excellent point. Even when something might be pressure filled like an audition, you could say to yourself, if I don't play well, I may not get the scholarship or I may not get admitted. There's some validity to that. I don't want you to say that, oh, just ignore the pressure. But you have to say in a healthy way, I'll do my best, and my best is what I can do right now. I can't be perfect right now, then okay, then you can do your best, and your best is what you can do. And be happy with that. Remember, we're playing music. We're not trying to do something, I don't know. I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's not like anything bad's going to happen if you don't play a perfect concert. It's not like anyone's going to die, and it's not like anyone is going to lose a limb or a life or anything. The audience is there to enjoy what you've got to offer. And if you can get out of your own way and make something beautiful happen, even if it's not perfect, I think you've done your job. So I think I would tell my younger self to not put so much pressure on yourself in every moment you play, because it's really hard to thrive that way.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much brings our conversation to a close. It has been enlightening, to say the very least. And it seems like you've really got a lot of great knowledge that I hope my cellists are interested in going out and seeking as they consider their college careers.
And you can tell any of your cellists if they don't have access to a teacher, I would be glad to if they want to do a Zoom meeting, I would be glad to help them. If they want some feedback from their audition preparation, I'd be glad to just listen for free and help them out with it. The cool thing about this technology is I can sit in Kentucky and hear you in Washington and help you from here. So if you want to reach out that way, I'd be glad to listen to you and give you some feedback.
That is unbelievably generous. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier in the conversation when you were talking about just the supreme generosity and compassion coming around throughout the music community right now. I just interviewed Bradley Hawkins, who's a local cello teacher at SPU. And every weekday at 9 a.m., he does a cello class for anybody who wants to tune in. And I mean, maybe he's getting a little bit of notoriety. Maybe he'll get a couple of new students at SPU. But I think he's doing it just because it's a good thing to do. And I mean, me doing this podcast, yes, it's for my students here at school. But talking to people like you, it makes me feel good to connect and to give people a platform to talk about what they're doing and share the powerful connections that music can make, even in a quarantine like this.
Yeah, and I think especially in a quarantine like this, one of the things I've seen that's so awesome is so many people are posting on Facebook or YouTube concerts from home. I think Yo-Yo Ma started it playing in his house. I'm sure you've seen him sitting in some room in his house just playing for us out of his home. It's so intimate and it's so generous. I think a lot of people have taken that to heart. So it is a wonderful thing we can all share. And there's a community out there. You meet a musician, you immediately are friends, it seems.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, I've got a few more questions off camera, but that wraps things up for the podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.